Hey guys, I'm here, but I'm going to turn off my video and mute myself until you need me.
Okay.
John, we're ready to go anytime you want.
Okay, I got 1 minute. If everybody's connected, we'll start right at 1.
Let's see all who we have. Rosemary, John, Lori, Tyler, Tom, Sumner, Darlene. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're at 7. Who am I missing? I'm missing Angela
And Gwen?
Gwen. I don't think I saw her on there. They're not. Okay. Okay. At least you have quorum, John.
All right. We'll call the meeting to order now and have the reading of the meeting notice. Angela?
The Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Erie, PA will meet in special session on Tuesday, July 21st, 2020 at 1 o'clock p.m. in an online format to consider adopting the health and safety plans for the 2020-21 school year and for general business purposes by request of the President, John C. Harkins.
Now the roll call.
Mrs. McNair? Mrs. McNair? Mr. Nichols? Mr. Nichols?
Here.
Ms. Pickens?
Here.
Ms. Sheridan?
Here.
Mr. Spagel?
Here.
Mr. Titus?
Here.
Ms. Cooley?
Here.
Mrs. Feeney?
Here.
Mr. Harkins?
Here. And now the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone pledge to the nearest flag? I pledge allegiance to the
To
flag
the flag of the United States of America
And to
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation.
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I announced that the board met in executive session on Tuesday, June 30th of 2020, online via Zoom meeting from 3:22 p.m. to 4:08 p.m. regarding legal and real estate matters. That was an executive session. There are no citizens who requested speaking time. So the next item will be the reopening plan with the superintendent. We have a resolution on the agenda, but he will now inform us about how it was prepared, where we are at this moment, and what's involved. So, Mr. Superintendent, the reopening plan.
Thank you, Mr. President. And before I turn it over to Erica to talk in more detail about our plan, I just want to take a minute and thank everyone that assisted us with the development of the COVID-19 health and safety plans that are on the agenda today for board consideration. The plans were developed with input from parents, students, teachers, support staff, administrators, board members, and school nurses. And I'd also like to thank the Erie County Department of Health and the Erie County Department of Public Safety for providing their input and their ongoing support throughout this process. The plans that are on the agenda today provide a framework for the district to operate under the red, yellow, and green phases and include both in-person and virtual instruction options in the green and yellow phases and virtual instruction in the red phase. And although we're currently planning to reopen although we're currently planning to reopen school in the fall under the green phase, circumstances may and likely will change between now and the start of school. We continue to monitor conditions and will work with our partners at the Erie County Department of Health to adjust our plans when necessary. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Erica, and she's going to go over the reopening document that we've put together that we'd like to share with our families later today. And for help you follow along, that link is also in the board portal.
Hi, everybody. We're excited to bring this in front of you today because we know it's something that you, our district staff, and of course our families have been looking forward to. So I'll walk you through it today, but I'd just like to start by saying that in general, you'll find that the plan was devised with kind of 3 guiding principles that Brian has spoke to in the past, and that is, of course, to number 1, ensure the health and safety of our students and staff, to maximize in-person, in-school learning when possible, and to provide the most flexibility to our families. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you what that looks like. Just give me one moment, please. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is a 16-page document. You have it in a link, so I won't go over in great detail, but I want to touch on it to let you know what's included. Really, this plan touches on everything from instruction and the different options for families, everything from instruction to transportation, food distribution, all aspects of district operations. It begins with a message from our superintendent that really kind of sets the stage, lets people know where we're at right now, what challenges we're facing, and what options they have. We're asking families to review this guide and all of the different options that are included in it and make a selection in terms of how their student will be returning to school by Friday, August 14th. The document begins with just briefly outlining each of the options that we're offering to students. As we mentioned before, we have a menu of options, everything from in-school learning to fully remote instruction and a hybrid model that allows both in-person and online instruction. And finally, we want to make sure that families and students are aware that right here in our school district, we have the Cyber Choice Academy, which is our K-12 cyber school, which would, for some families, would offer the most flexible option as we move forward. The following pages detail in greater depth each of those options, describing what those options would look like on a daily basis for students. Option 1, the in-school learning, is obviously what we are most familiar with, but of course there will be changes, and this page details those. It goes into detail about the health and safety precautions we'll be taking, how our facilities will be cleaned and disinfected, and how we'll handle busing from a cleaning and disinfection standpoint, all of which Neil can speak more directly to. But the idea here is to send the message to families that if you send your student for in-school instruction, we are taking the precautions necessary outlined by our local and state health agencies to ensure that they will have a safe experience. We know some families may choose not to do that for a variety of reasons, which is why we're offering fully remote instruction through a new online platform. That remote instruction is going to be delivered synchronously, live streamed from the classroom into a student's home. They'll have the opportunity to interact in real time with their peers and their teachers. So this page of the guide fully discusses that option. It also, on an important note, lets families know that for the first time, we are going to be able to provide devices to every student in order to access this possibility. iPads for students in pre-K to 1 and Chromebooks in grades 2 to 12. Again, in an attempt to provide kind of the most flexibility possible for our families, we wanted to institute a hybrid model, which is helpful in a couple of ways. If future, if the current state changes and we are required to further restrict the number of students in a classroom or building, a hybrid model allows for both online or remote and in-school instruction. But it's also an option available right now to families who need a little bit more flexibility in their schedules. Families are going to have two different options. They can opt for in-school instruction on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, and remote instruction for on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or flipping that, remote instruction on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and in-school instruction on Tuesday and Thursdays. We want to make clear that when we say in-school instruction, that can mean direct face-to-face instruction from their teacher in a classroom, or depending on enrollment, classroom configuration, social distancing requirements, it could be that they are participating in a common area with their classes live streamed. And finally, we're proud to offer a fourth option, which is full cyber school through the EPS Cyber Choice Academy that serves students in kindergarten through 12th grade. Students in kindergarten through 5th use the Accelerate online platform. Students in 6 to 12 utilize Edgenuity. And this allows the ultimate flexibility in that students, for whatever reason, if they are not able or willing to attend in person, this allows them to complete their instruction on their own pace at a schedule that's convenient for them, while still meeting accountability for attendance and completion. We have a couple pages in the guide that show a couple of results from a survey we conducted of our parents. We wanted to communicate that this guide was not created in a vacuum. We, as Brian said, really relied on input from parents, students, teachers, community members. And you'll see that two questions of note. Most people, nearly 2,000 people have responded by July 6th, and most of them said that they were extremely, or rather completely comfortable returning to a traditional on-campus setting. And most of them, 45%, that said that that was their preferred method of learning. We want to make sure that we communicate to parents that although much is changing here, much is staying the same, and that includes providing the support for our students who need it, including support through programming, through personal support, our student assistance program, and also through the great partnership that the partnerships created in our community schools. So this page of the guide kind of outlines the supports available and reaffirms our commitments to those supports. We know there are that some of our special education parents or parents of special education students will have some questions, and so we include a note here that we recognize that that they may have special concerns, and that we are committed to working directly with them to address those concerns. Something kind of new and exciting this year that we're communicating to parents through this guide is that for the first time, we will be able to provide district-operated yellow bus service to all eligible elementary school students. Shortly here in the future, we will be sending home information to those eligible students, letting them know what their bus route is, but also for families who choose to opt out of that transportation, they'll be able to fill out a form opting out. And we are encouraging any family who can drive or walk their student to school to please do so, because doing so frees up seats for students who need them most and allows us to social distance to the maximum extent possible on our buses. Finally, you might imagine that there are a million questions when it comes to basically reimagining your entire district operation. So we have tried to address many of them in the following pages. Many of these questions came from parents who wrote us or contacted us, but also from the forum that we recently held, where we also received feedback. So we have 3 pages of frequently asked questions here, divided into topics such as health and safety, our facilities, basic questions about instruction and daily operations, technology and transportation. Finally, questions about student services and special ed, and also sports and extracurricular clubs and after-school activities. We did make sure to let our non-English speaking families know that language assistance is available. We are in the process of hoping to translate the entire document, at least into the top 5 languages spoken in the district. And here in this document, we are letting families know that translation services are available through the district, through the Multicultural Resource Center, and the International Institute. And then finally, we end by just again reiterating that our path forward will be guided by the need to ensure safety, flexibility, and support for our families, and that our mission to continue to provide an excellent education and a personal path to success for every student continues. So this information is going to be posted to our website and our Facebook after this meeting, and also emailed to or mailed directly to our families. I know that was a lot, and I wasn't sure of the time available, so I went through that pretty quickly, but I'm happy to answer any questions or field any concerns.
Before we have questions, is there anything else, Brian, you wanted to present or explain? And then we'll have a few questions.
Yes, but before we open up to questions, I would like to kind of go through where we are in the process and share some of the outstanding items. And I'm going to share my screen.
Yep.
And this document is also in board docs for you if it's easier for you to follow along. But this kind of breaks down the outstanding items that we have to prepare for the start of school, and who's responsible for getting those done, and the deadlines that we've set for ourselves. So as you know, Teresa has been in charge of the instructional side of this project, and Neil has been on the facilities and support services. So I'm going to ask Teresa to start out and just give us a overview of the big items on instruction.
Thanks, Brian. So We are mostly in a planning phase right now with instruction, and you'll see as we go through the calendar, we'll be moving to a communication phase here shortly. But just some highlights I'd like to bring to your attention. We have established committees, and we are going to do the same thing at the elementary level to continue the work for the unfinished learning from the spring. Finalizing a first quarter professional development plan, a first quarter assessment plan. We'll review those with principals and administrators by next Monday and communicate that out to staff by next Tuesday. Skipping down a little bit, as we receive results from families as to which learning pathway they choose, we'll finalize those groupings, and we will develop staffing structure according to building setup once we have all of the numbers. So that would be the number of families who have chosen to be in school every day, the hybrid, and the remote. Finalize the student schedules with the principals, and you can see at the bottom is the first day for teachers, August 25th, and we will provide them with the instructional plan and expectations for the first quarter. Our goal this year is to take things one quarter at a time as we plan. So the first 2 or 3 weeks into the first quarter, we will reflect and evaluate and move forward trying to plan for the second quarter.
Okay, and Neil, could you touch on some of the major topics on facilities and support services?
I sure can. So much like the instructional side of things, we have a subcommittee that is working through the facilities side of things. Some of the outstanding tasks that we need to work through is basically setting up parameters for daily routines for each of the buildings. So pickups, drop-offs, and fire drills. So essentially, we can't make a district-wide plan for each individual building since each building is a little bit different. But we at least want to give everybody a starting point and say these are what the expectations are, and then let the building principals make those decisions. From a transportation side, the plan is to have the routes done by the end of this month so that the following week we can communicate that out to the parents. And that letter home will say, this is what bus you're on, this is what time your pickup will be. And that's how the parents will be able to opt out of transportation for the 2021 school year. We've got a couple of things going in. You can see that we've got the security vestibule work should be completed in there. We also have the ventilation report is going to be set to us by the end of the second week in August, and then we'll sit down and discuss with the architects and the engineers what that looks like. And then lastly, from a technology standpoint, we are developing the plan for what distribution is going to look like. And we're also a little concerned with technology being here for the start of the school year. We were waiting for the information back from the vendors with a hard due date. And so in the event that the big order that we have is not in, we are making backup plans to ensure that every student has a device.
Okay, so we feel pretty confident right now that we're moving in the right direction. The instructional plan, we're comfortable with what we've developed, and the fact that we're going to be able to transition very easily between in-person and remote instruction. I think, and Teresa and Neil, feel free to weigh in. I think the two biggest things that are keeping us up at night right now are the technology and whether or not that's going to be here in time, and the staffing. We've had at this point, and it may have changed since this morning, about 47 of our staff members indicate that they may not be able to come back in the fall. We've sent a survey out to everyone today so that we can gauge that. And as we collect that, we're going to have to adapt based on what staff in the fall. Teresa, Neil, is there anything else you want to share?
Just one thing to piggyback on the staffing, Brian, would be that once we do get the numbers of students and the numbers of staff finalized, that's what's going to allow us to put the final pieces of the puzzle together when we design out our buildings. So once we have all of that information, we'll have a better idea of what our buildings will look like on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, and that's all we have on this topic. Is there any questions from the board?
Superintendent, first of all, you and all of the people who have and are continuing to work on developing this framework are to be commended highly for such flexibility, nimble thinking, and creativity to position us to be in a good position in late August. So I commend you, and I'm sure everybody who is associated with this, parents too, are going to be very grateful that the work you've done up to this point is very outstanding. I'll just mention one quick topic, unless you want to talk about it another time, but where does athletics figure in? And after you answer that, then we'll go to questions from the board. Anything on athletics? Is that to be determined, or you have something ready today? Or
We do have that plan on the agenda for approval tonight. Neil, do you want to just highlight a few things?
Yeah, so the first step, obviously, for our athletes to come back is for the health and safety plan to be approved by the board. Once that happens, then our coaches can start bringing athletes back. At this point, we are still working the idea that we're at skill and drill mode, and that there are pretty tight restrictions on what the coaches and the athletes can do. But at this time in the game, this is probably about the time that we should be doing strength conditioning and skill training anyway. So we're not really far behind. We will continue to monitor what the PIAA and PDE says for when competitions can resume. They have not really made any true judgment as to what's going to happen with high school athletics for this year. So we're planning ahead as if we can have competitive sports, but we will wait to hear what the PIAA and PDE says.
Thank you, Neil.
You're welcome.
Now, board members, are there any questions or concerns that you have and want to express or ask?
Mr. President,
Spiegel?
I guess this is toward Teresa. Are we actively recruiting teachers? And do we have any idea of how many teachers we think we're looking to fill spots for? I know you said you'll fill in all the details once we know the student numbers, but are we actually looking for teachers now?
Tom, we are. I know Natalie and her team are recruiting some teachers. We're having interviews right now. We have to see exactly, just because an accommodation, Tom, might be that the teacher may not be able to be with students, but could be in an isolated room teaching remotely from there. So I hope that answers your question, that Natalie and her team are actively recruiting to fill in some spots we may have. And we are also looking for creative ways to utilize our human capital that maybe can't be with kids.
Is that all, Tom?
Yes, thank you.
Any other board members? If not, we can go on to the superintendent's next presentation, which would be on the student handbook and code of conduct for the 20.
Mr. President, I'm sorry, I was muted. I have some questions about this.
Okay, Mr. Nichols, go ahead.
First of all, I think it's very unrealistic to be offering all things to all people here. We can't afford to offer this many plans. You have half the kids have already said, we want a hybrid or we want to be at home. We need to pick one and do it. It looks like it's a hybrid. We can't be, there's not much time here. We have a safety plan that right now doesn't even address ventilation, which is hugely important because everybody's behind on this. We're doing what we can. It's 28 more times likely to get this inside. Some of our buildings have steam heat and such, which might be better, but some probably have central ventilation. That's the same as a nursing home or a penitentiary. I mean, this is very dangerous. And what I really don't like about this plan, there is no explanation on how we're going to shut down. Apparently, the whole thing is to reference the health department and listen to them. I don't know how long it takes them to get tests. All I know is we're a tinderbox for this. This is where the huge risk is. If we have an outbreak in a school, we should have parameters where we're shutting buildings down. So this plan has no safety aspect because it assumes everything will work, and it won't work. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. Any other board members on that topic?
Lori Pickens, raise your hand.
Lori?
Yeah. So I honestly have a whole lot of concerns about the entire plan. I have a lot of concerns about utilizing this extra space that we have. I have a lot of concerns about if, let's just say by chance, every single student shows up to a school building, right? And I mean, I've already had this conversation yesterday, you know, we can't turn them away. So what does ensuring the safety of the students, what does ensuring the safety of the staff look like? And I know that we are saying that there's a possibility that miraculously every kid could fit in a school building at 6 feet apart. But honestly, I mean, if we're just taking a real live look, is that saying every student can fit if we are minusing all the other stuff that teachers have in their room? Okay, that means, are we talking about everyone must just be standing for a full day? And I know I'm saying that jokingly, but I'm actually really serious as to how we're going to ensure the safety of the kids, the safety of the students. If we have teachers who are already saying they're not going to be able to make it in, let's just say a student in a classroom ends up sick, or say a teacher does. So that means are we closing down a whole building? Are we closing down one classroom? Because every student and every person is going to have to be quarantined who's now come into contact. I mean, I'm just looking at what does the safety and the overall well-being of our students and teachers, what is all of that going to look like without a whole lot of stop and pausing and then trying to pick back up and make things just be well going forward. And with social distancing, some of our kids might not get that too quick. So what happens when kids are not? Okay, what happens when they're like, I want to be near my friends? Are we looking at things like, I mean, we can't discipline them, right? Like you can't start doing that. So what is all of this? I guess I just am looking for a peaceful place in this. And I know we want to get the kids back and all of that, but I just feel like there's a lot of things that are just left untouched and just unclear for me.
So I can try to answer some of your questions, Ms. Pickens. First of all, Neil and his team went through every single room in every building and measured them out. And based on that, we are able, with 6 feet of social distancing, to fit every student in every building. Now, some of them are tight, Deal and Edison being two of them, that we would have some challenges and may need to adjust accordingly. But we can fit the students in the classes, and the principals now are already starting to go through and rearranging the desks and the common spaces to accommodate all the students. And as they're doing that, I also like to point out that we had 20% of our families that said that they did not want to send their kids back to school in the fall. So we're planning for 100%, but we would anticipate 80% or less coming back on a daily basis. The other thing that, has been, again, the Erie County Department of Health has been a great partner through all this. They have agreed to go through, once we have every one of our buildings set up, and do a walkthrough and make recommendations to change things to make it safer. So we're going to have that as well to ensure that, what we're doing in the building complies with the 6 feet of distancing, and the Erie County Department of Health is comfortable with it. As far as the contact tracing, and again, we've had weekly meetings with them and the Erie County superintendents for the last month and a half now. They've been very responsive. They said that they were going to be in charge of the contact tracing. So if there is a student or a teacher that does come down with COVID, then they would conduct the contact tracing. And what they would ask from us is a list of students and staff that those individuals came in contact with, so that they could follow up and do that tracing. They also recommended that we get at least one individual in the district trained on contact tracing, Neil is going to do that here. I believe it's next week. So that, they have a point person here that understands what they're doing as far as contact tracing and can provide them all the information they need to do that. And they've said that the cutoff is 15 minutes of contact within 6 feet. So they said that we won't necessarily be quarantining an entire building or an entire classroom. It will be based on their contact tracing and the interviews they do. And they'll tell us what we need to do in the building as far as shutting down areas or the entire building. So that, again, we'll let them do their job and we'll support them as much as we can.
Okay, so I got another question. Are we able, I don't know if you guys have pictures of what a room looks like, because I know before we had pictures and I know everything has changed from looking at the plan that was sent. Can we see what the pictures look like of what a room will look like now with the social distancing seats? Do you guys, you don't have to show me the picture right now, but I'm just asking.
I don't know if I can get you one right now, but
yeah, would you be able to send one over? And then what happens if technology is not here and the kids the 20% who decided we're not going into in person, where are they going to fall at with their learning, especially since now it'll be new stuff as opposed to just recap?
We do have a lot of laptops that we're not going to use next year, so that's going to be part of that fallback plan. The other thing, just keep in mind that we did distribute devices to every student that needed one last year. So theoretically, right now, every student has a device in their home, either one that we have given them or one that they're a personal one that they can use. And we do also have, again, these laptops so that we could backfill any other individuals that may need something if the need arises. As far as taking a look at the classrooms, we were going to mention that tomorrow we are planning a press conference just to share our plans with the media here. We're going to have that at 9 o'clock at Strong Vincent, and we're going to take them down to a socially distanced classroom. So if any board members want to join us tomorrow for that and come see the classroom, that would be a great opportunity. Otherwise, we could certainly make arrangements if anybody wants to come in and walk around the building that's prepared.
Okay. I mean, I have a billion questions, but I'm not even going to do the whole billion. I will digress and give space for anyone else. But I do have 2 pages of questions. So I'll probably send it via email, and then that'll make it easier and less time consuming.
I would just say we've got 5 or 6 weeks to go till the start of school, and what the administration has prudently done is prepare us for any eventuality as best they can. And at some point in late August, if circumstances determine that we should highlight one of these options or throw it all out the window and announce the school district is hereby shut down, then that happens. But in the meantime, they've prepared us as best they could to proceed toward that start of school and be ready for anything as best we can. But we'll have time to question and they'll have time to reanalyze and react. So all these questions and concerns are valid, of course.
Mr. President.
When?
I have a question. You're saying at Strong Vincent. Strong Vincent doesn't have the number of students that Erie High have. So what is that distancing seating looking like at Erie High? Not Strong Vincent, because Strong Vincent has enough space where they can allow for social distancing. Erie High, you have all of your students. What does that look like? That's a concern a lot of parents are asking. I'm sending my child to Erie High. Erie High has 3,000 students. How are you going to social distance 3,000 students? Are they changing classes? Are the teachers coming into the classroom? Parents have some concerns about that.
So just to clarify, we have about 1,800 students at Erie High that attend on a daily basis because we have a pretty big group that goes down to Emerson Gridley. We're still working through that. Again, we went through the buildings and Neil, I don't know if you can talk in more detail about Erie High, but based on the measurements, we can fit the students based on utilizing the common spaces. I haven't been up there this week, so I don't know where they are with their planning. Teresa or Neil, do you Have you talked to them recently?
I do know as far as the scheduling structure goes, they're trying to put students in cohorts as much as possible to minimize any class changing. That is due to me on the 24th. Actually, no, I'm sorry. It's due to me tomorrow. We'll finalize that on the 24th. So I'll have more information then. Essentially, what we're looking to do is break the students in. So half of the students would be in person in front of a teacher, and half would either choose, this is the hybrid model, would choose to learn remotely in an overflow space or learn remotely at home. So technically, there would only be half of the students in the classroom at a time. Once we figure out how many students will be physically attending.
Lori, did you want to be heard?
Sorry, I was muted. So I know I said I wasn't going to ask the billion, but I have a few other questions. What happens if within like the year, parents decide that, keeping their kids at home is not going to work? So they're going to send them back, let's just say to begin middle of the year or whatnot. What's going to happen with that? And then also right back to, the space in the room. What about maneuvering through the classroom? Is 6 feet in the room looking like everyone must stay in one space? There is no teacher movement. There's no student movement, or even if they're in the gym, libraries, all of that, the extra overflow space. Just what does that look like? What does that sound like for us, for the students? Do you understand what I'm asking? I mean, I don't know if I'm making sense. So one question is, if the parents decide to send their kids, the next question is, in the classroom, are we looking at 6 feet, you stay where you are, and moving and maneuvering through the classroom is not even an option? You're muted, Brian.
Sorry. First, we're going to ask parents to commit for a quarter to a particular option. So that'll give us, the ability to schedule that. Now, certainly if, circumstances change, we'd work with families on a case-by-case basis to make those adjustments if we can. But again, that'll give us the ability to actually plan and schedule based on the number of students that will be in the building. And second, I guess as far as the classroom goes, yes, we are going to probably limit mobility within the classroom as much as possible to ensure that students stay 6 feet apart.
And if I could just add to that, Brian. So, Lori, one of the things, and we did a test run, I think it was last week. We did a test run in one of the classrooms. And if you can picture the teacher standing at the front of the room and working on their electronic devices, and you have kids sitting 6 feet apart. So rather than what you would traditionally see a teacher writing on a whiteboard, the whiteboard is going to be in front of each student on their Chromebook. Mm-hmm. They're going to be able to interact that way. It's a little bit different than a teacher being able to go from desk to desk to desk, but this is a way we're trying to accommodate that.
Okay. I'm going to digress.
And then if I could kind of jump in, if you guys don't mind. When we went through and measured all of Erie High, because of the size of the building and how many classrooms that there are there, we will be able to fit every single kid in the building by utilizing the classrooms and the common areas. To Mr. Nichols' point about ventilation, we do know that there are certain rooms in that building that don't have any fresh air. And so those rooms have been identified already. And I believe there were 16 altogether. And the administration at Erie High has already been told that no students can go into those rooms because there are no windows and there is no fresh air going into the rooms.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. President.
Tyler?
So my heart is racing really bad. I'm just going to put that out there too. Like this, and I think what Brian and Neil and and the whole team, Teresa, what you guys have done is phenomenal. And I think that you have been placed in literally an impossible situation. This is an impossible situation. children and families are going to be harmed no matter what decision we make as we go through this. And I think that it's a harm reduction model is the best model that we can do. And so I guess all this being said, I am so very uncomfortable bringing students back. And I know with the best efforts that we have in place and everything that is possible that we could do within our own control, this virus is gonna spread through our student body. There's just no way to stop it because children are going to be children and families are going to be families. And I just want that to be out there that I'm terrified. I'm terrified of just having the students back in our buildings because we know that they're not completely ready yet. We're having issues, especially with the airflow, ventilation, classrooms, just the setup. And I know that you guys are and excuse my French, I know this is a public meeting, but you're busting your ass to make this as safe as humanly possible. And this virus doesn't really care. And I'm so afraid that this is going to hit our Black and brown students the hardest because that's where the lower socioeconomic implications are going to fall. That's where the families are living multi-generational homes. That's where they're not able to socially distance. And so even if we do everything we can to make our schools safe, we don't know what's happening outside of the school, and that's going to be coming into the schools every day. And a lot of our students are going to be asymptomatic. Temperature finding that, or taking the temperature is a great way to kind of get in the front of it. But we know sometimes that's too late, that the temperature doesn't rise until they've already spread it. And so I just want to put that out there. Like those were my fears, just so you know where I stand as a board member, and just where my concerns are. I've really appreciated the discussion, and I know you guys are doing everything within your power. I can't imagine being in your shoes, and I know this is a team that's working together. And I want to thank you for everything that you guys have done. And I just wanted, I guess, to as a board member to express that this really scares the crap out of me.
Mr. President.
Darlene.
Yeah, and I don't want to piggyback on what Tyler said, but I 100% agree with him. Erica, the document they put out that I read yesterday was wonderful. It's easy to read, far easier than the document that PDE gave us that you guys had to fill out and then had to navigate through. I know that your hearts are all in the right place. I know that you are trying to do the very best that you can for our students and for our family. We lost a civil rights legend this past week, John Lewis. I wanted to ask Angela Jones to put him on the agenda today, but I didn't do it in enough time. So I hope we do that in August to recognize him. But one of the things that John Lewis said was that it's really important to be on the right side of history. And so we got to talk about what's really going on right now in our country. We've got to talk about the fact that we have an education system that's broken. It's inherently inequitable, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the nation. It needs to be reformed. We have a president and a secretary of education who have not supported public education with policy, and they've threatened to withhold resources from us if we don't reopen in the fall and do face-to-face instruction. And now is the time when I think we should be screaming, fund us. Fund us, give us what we need to offer our students the best education possible. If I approve of this plan, then I'm being complicit and I'm being part of the problem and I'm not being part of the solution. Because I want to be remembered on the right side of the history in this and not the wrong side of the history. This plan is so idealistic. It sets high aspirations and we can't fund them and we can't achieve them. And we need to say that out loud so that everyone in the community understands that our backs are up against the wall. We want to offer what our suburban districts are offering. But the reality is we really don't have the space. We really don't have the resources. We don't have the buses. We need to say that publicly. We can't compete with them. And we can't ensure our student safety, our community safety, because we know that this virus, it affects our brown and Black community at a much higher rate than it does our white counterpart communities, outlying communities. So when I read the plan, and I know that, Neil, you've done a great job, and I know you're not going to be surprised to say that I can't support it. Number one, transportation. We're putting 48 students on a bus. That's 66% capacity. I don't know if there are any other plans I had the opportunity to read at least one other plan. They have 24 students on a bus. I can only agree to 24 students on a bus, one student to a seat, unless they're related. If they're related, they can sit next to each other. I'm sorry. And I know we don't have the resources to do that, but we got to say it. We got to let the community know this. Nursing services. We've talked about this before. We can't get enough LPNs. We can't pay them enough money. So are we going to have a CSN in every building? I don't think so. We're probably going to have either a CSN or a staff nurse. We're in a pandemic. We need to have more resources for that service. I have a million questions. One other concern is the ventilation. You know, and until we get that study back and really know, I'm afraid for us telling parents, yeah, you can, all your children can come back. And then we have to say, oh, never mind. We're sorry. We really want them all to come back, but we can't because of X, Y, and Z. So I could go on and on and on and on with all of my concerns that I have. One other is that green doesn't look very different than yellow. And I almost feel like yellow should look a little bit different than green. Because in yellow, we're supposed to be in caution mode. So again, as much as I want to be able to approve what you're offering, and I believe that what you're trying to offer, it would be in the best interests of our children's education, I don't believe it's in the best interests of our children's health and safety. We don't have enough resources. I don't know if you want me to address some of them, like who's going to take the temperature checks, who's going to take care of the sick, infected COVID student, while the nurse also has to administer medications. What is the procedure for students going to the nurse's office? How do you communicate that? What if the phone systems aren't working and that's how you're trying to communicate whether you can send a child to, what happens then? What if I have a child that's throwing up in my room? And then I'm a teacher too, so I've been having those terror dreams at night. Last night was the worst night I've had yet. Classroom out of control and everything I'm trying isn't working and students are getting sick. And, I'm so emotional and fraught and practically reduced to tears. Those are the kinds of dreams that I'm having at night, imagining what it's going to be like for our teachers going back. And then also we have 46 teachers that can't come back or because of health reasons. How many teachers do we have that have family members that are sick and they're putting the family members at risk if they come back? We have to consider that as well. And I've taken up a lot of time, so I'm going to stop there. I'll send you all my other questions. But again, when it came to transportation right off the bat, I knew I was saying no to the plan. So.
Thanks, Darlene. I've been advised that Angela McNair has joined us and has a question. Angela?
I have comments. As a child care provider of a facility that has 79 students currently enrolled, and as somebody who had to experience reopening with students who are school age and non-school age, I just feel like I could say that trying to service 79 kids is way less than trying to service a whole school full of children. So I'm going to tell you how difficult it's going to be to reopen in the fall, based under the COVID guidelines that you have to follow. When you walk in the door, you have to have a temperature check. You have to be sanitized. And like Darlene said, who's going to do all of this? Are you going to hire staff you're going to have to hire staff that's strictly there to check kids into the school every day. And how long is that process going to take? How long is it going to take them to get to their classrooms? Are teachers going to be waiting for how are they even going to do that process? Because the process that we have now, we only literally have not even 10 kids show up, first of all, out of all the kids that we have enrolled. And right now, we don't allow, you can't allow parents or anybody from outside into the building, period. That's CDC guidelines. You cannot allow them into the building. Our parents have to drop them off at the door. They can't come in the classroom. The only people that can be in the classrooms is the teacher that's teaching the children at the time. Basically, you have to hire somebody to check kids in and walk them to their classroom, because it can't be a lot of different people in the hallway. So every student that comes in the door will have to be checked in, walked to their classrooms, because you can't let them pass the front door without a temperature check. Also the social distancing. Now we have a daycare room, and we typically keep we keep siblings together. So that's going to be another issue where you have children that are in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. They can't all be in the same classroom. So now you got students breaking up into different classrooms. So how are you going to track it? What is going to be your tracking process of the COVID? So if a family comes in, we know that they're all split up in between different rooms. So once you start, the tracking is going to be a nightmare. If you happen to have a case or two, and you're gonna have a case or two. Literally, the first week that I opened, we had to scare ourselves, and my friend's daycare had to close down for a week. So what happens when you have to shut the building down? Because technically, you're supposed to shut your building down, your store down, your restaurant down for so many hours if there's a case in the building. So that's another concern that, how are we going to deal with that? We're going to open it, and then somebody comes in there with COVID, because they are, I promise you. And then you're going to have to shut school back down. And I don't know, quite honestly, I didn't read the whole thing, but I'm just going to tell you based off the experience. And then also, my question would be the buses. That's a nightmare. You got kids everywhere walking past each other. It can't be more than, like, my girls ride the bus. I would never send them on the bus. As bad as I want them to get on that bus and go to school tomorrow, like, I really want Brian to, like, come pick them up and take them to school tomorrow. But I would never, I don't feel comfortable with doing that. And it's kind of sad, because you got all these students that receive special education services, and so many students that have IEPs that need to be in the classroom, whose parents cannot teach them at home. They actually really need to be there, but do they need to be there and get sick and take it home to their grandmother or grandfather and they die, or get really sick and end up on a ventilator themselves, or give it to the teachers? We got to also consider the staff. There's been some discussion on social media. I'm friends with a lot of teachers on social media, and their question is, are we going to move around from room to room? Are we going to stay in the same room and let kids move around from classroom to classroom? Because technically, the students are supposed to be in the same class all day long. So when you get to the high school level, where the students, and middle school level, where they switch classes, that's going to be very difficult to do safely, is to have students in the hallways. They're not going to keep their mask on, guarantee you that. Even the older kids are actually worse at keeping their mask on than the younger kids. I have to yell at my older teenagers more than I do littler kids that I'm around. It's just too many variables right now. And with us taking a step back, we are in green. Technically, with the guidelines that they just put back on us, we're in yellow, but they don't want to call it yellow, because people want to feel like they're in green, because people want to do what they want to do. But we're in yellow right now if you want to go by the restrictions that was put back on us. And we're probably going to end up back in red. But you got to consider, like, it's so many things you got to do. The sanitation process. I mean, we have to wash hands at our facility. You walk in the door, you got to wash your hands. Before you touch a snack, you got to wash your hands. After you do whatever, you got to wash your hands. You go outside, you got to wash your hands. Like, literally, there's process of disinfecting the room multiple times a day. Who's going to be doing that? The teacher is going to be having to disinfect their rooms while trying to teach the children throughout multiple times a day. And if they're switching classes, they need a full sanitation after the classes switch. So it's like a lot that I don't even know. I can guarantee it's not in that plan. As far as even sanitation and things like that. And I know I'm being long-winded, but what I'm saying is what I know because I'm doing it now. So I feel like me being long-winded is worth listening to because I reopened. And with only that little bit of kids, you know, to keep them socially distanced, you can only have maybe 10 kids in the room and safely social distance. And I know that our classrooms have 20, sometimes 25 kids in the classroom. I do feel like it's mixed messages also with saying, oh, you can come to school this week or not come to school that week. You know, we don't know who's in and out of these kids' homes. When they go, we don't know how the parents are going to handle their childcare situation. So we don't know, like, yeah, one day they might stay at home with grandma. Next day they might stay at home with friends and end up bringing COVID into the schools just based off the fact that it's so much inconsistency involved. I know that there has to be some in-person instruction for our funding. There's really no solid plan on how to provide the instruction, the in-person instruction. I would just say, do a poll because there's a lot of parents that don't even want their kids to come back to school in the building. See how many people that you actually have that are interested in returning into the building, and then see how many of those parents that are interested in returning their kids to the building feel about, possibly, homeschooling and letting just a certain percentage come back and then maybe have a waiting list. Because there might be a point where you have a family that says, hey, I'm going to send my kids, and then they change their mind, and then the person on the waiting list, has the opportunity to step in. But you got to be very careful about this process. Until there's a vaccine for COVID, it's going to be alive and real, and even afterwards, because we don't even know if that's going to work. So we got to take this thing very seriously. Numbers are not being reported accurately. People are not being tested, so we don't even really know. When they say we went from 4 one day to 22 the next day. It all depends on the testing. Will there be testing available at the schools? Well, when the students came back to my childcare facility, I had them redo all of their paperwork, number one, and everybody had to go to the doctor and get a physical. Every last child, every last staff has a brand new physical, and we also had free testing at Booker T. Washington Center where all of my staff were tested. So how do we handle testing? Are we going to try to advocate for some funding for testing at the schools if we decide to reopen? It's just a lot going on. We are going to need increased medical staff. If a child gets sick, and really does test positive for COVID, that's just going to be an absolute disaster for the building, the staff. You're going to scare the crap out of all the teachers because they're not going to want to be in the building if there is some cases of COVID. It's just a lot to think about. I know that we're obligated to do certain things as educators and as a district in order to receive our funding, but it's July. It's almost the end of July. School supposed to start in less than 2 months. I would suggest rethinking everything and really looking into the particulars, and as well as who polled the parents to see who actually really wants to bring their students back, because a lot of parents do not. And then also see what population you can serve safely, and how you can, if the state is forcing their hand to make us do in person, how can you bring only a certain percentage of students back into the classrooms that want to be there safely in order to meet requirements? And how will you continue to educate students that will continue to be homeschooled? Because that's an issue too. A lot of parents have no clue what they're doing with their students. And can we talk about, will there be in person, maybe they're not physically in the same room with them, but live streaming with the students instead of bringing them all back into the classroom? How could we put the teacher and the students in the classroom all on screen together? So, I mean, we got to think of some options, but I think just reopening and saying, okay, well, students can you know, if you feel like bringing them, you can bring them. If you no, first of all, we need to even make that clear. You know, we can't say, oh, if you feel like bringing them 3 days a week, they can come, or if you don't feel like bringing them, no, we need to establish some solid expectations about even returning, and not giving all these options. It's either one or the other, you know. So that's just my thought. Just know that it's very stressful. The teachers will be stressed out. They will be. It's not a will they be or if they are. They will be stressed out. The staff will be stressed out. It's going to be a very stressful situation, and you also have to consider the anxiety that will be caused towards the teachers and the staff that have to deal with this in the buildings, along with teaching the students, managing behaviors, and all of those things above. So that's just my insight. If the team who's putting this all together would like to discuss more of this offline and off of this meeting with me, I'd be more than willing, because I have reopened. And I know, I know daycare is different than school, but it's also a lot of it's the same. And I do know that, you know, it's something that you got to really think through. And I have policies that I've created that could help something in this process, but it's something that I don't feel comfortable voting on until some particulars are ironed out. Thank you.
Mr. President.
When?
As a director of a daycare, I do agree with some of the things Angela is saying, because our parents are not allowed in the building. We tempt the kids and our staff as soon as they hit that door. If their temperature's at a certain degree, they can't enter the building. We don't even let them into the building. We do it right at the entranceway. So it's not an easy thing. We reopened June 1st, and we've been dealing with a lot. So I am familiar and quite aware of the CDC and reopening, the guidelines and the policies. We're not at the level of a school district. We're on a smaller level, but we're still doing what's required of us as an educational facility. And I'm not hearing a lot of things. We have one person that does the temp. We have one person that's our contact person. So we really have to be seriously thinking this over, because I'm scared of the numbers of students. As she said, we don't know who they go to when they leave us, where they've been, what they're doing. I do know from the daycare standpoint of the nightmare that can happen.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. Nichols.
Well, it's the responsibility of this board to set the policy for the district. And I think we all agree that the administration's worked very hard on this extremely difficult problem. And I'm not trying to denigrate their efforts, and nobody else is. But when you have our largest employer in town, Erie Insurance, with considerable resources and a mature, responsible population, they're not open. I think we should look at that and say, well, maybe we shouldn't open either. And since we set the policy, I want to move that we open on a remote basis for the school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments on the superintendent's presentation of the reopening plan, which we will later vote on?
Mr. Harkins, I commend Mr. Polito and his entire staff of what they're doing. I really do commend the hard work and time that they have put into it, but the concern is high.
Okay, we'll have a chance to discuss and then ultimately vote on this when we get to the new business segment of the meeting. Is there anything else on this at this moment?
Mr. President, based on the comments I'm hearing today from the board, I'm sensing that there is no support for our recommendation. And if that's the case, I don't think that the next two items we are really relevant as far as discussion. So might I just recommend that we skip over those and move right into the vote?
Well, if that's your wish, because they were your segments, we can go to the new business section of the meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the new business and the supplemental new business that's before us electronically?
Mr. Harkins,
Mr. Walker?
may I recommend that we separate item 6.04, which is the resolution to approve the district health and safety plan, and the other items, so that the other general business items of the district are not lumped in with that?
If that can be done, Angela, logistically, mechanically?
Yes, I'll make the adjustments following the meeting.
All right, may we have a motion to approve all of the new business and supplemental, excluding the resolution about the health and safety plan, which we will deal with separately after we have.
Mr. President, there were some things in the student handbook that I wanted to discuss. And Brian, do we have to vote on the handbook today, or is that something that we could do at our August meeting?
It's not on the agenda. We just wanted to get an update where we were at.
Okay, thank you.
We can get back to that later in the meeting if you want, under the any other matter for discussion section 2. But at this point, do we have a motion to approve all of the new business and the supplemental, excluding the plan for reopening?
I'll motion it.
Moved by Rose Sheridan. Second? You don't have a second, we might as well go home.
Second.
Who's that?
Tom.
Okay, second by Mr. Spiegel. Any discussion on those items which do not include the reimagining, reopening our schools plan, but everything else before us? Roll call.
Mrs. McNair? Mrs. McNair?
Angela, are you there?
Mr. Nichols?
Yes.
Ms. Pickens?
Yes.
Ms. Sheridan?
Yes.
Mr. Spiegel?
Yes.
Mr. Titus?
Yes.
Ms. Cooley?
Yes.
Mrs. Feeney?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes. So the only remaining item before us in the new business is to approve the resolution for the district health safety plans going forward. I just want to say that despite what the superintendent said, I support the plan. I think he's to be commended for having it. It's very flexible. It's not a final ultimate decision. It takes a step forward and allows for us to allow parents to react to and make decisions on what they're going to do, without which we're all going to sit and watch TV and wait and see what happens in 6 weeks. I think it's prudent and responsible for us to have some plan to move forward with that we can modify and react to all of the questions and concerns that have been expressed here today. We're all going to continue to have those things. And let's recognize we're not going to solve and fix every question that was raised. We have to do our best to meet our responsibility, and safety is first. So I don't know. I'm perplexed at how this blocks any of those things. I think it's the right thing to do, the best thing to do, and it's very flexible, and it leaves all kinds of options for us, and we can zero in on whatever those are as we get closer to the start of school. And it all may be out of our control anyway if the health department of the government in Harrisburg steps in and tells us. But to sit and wait because we have all these concerns and there'll be more raised, we have nothing to react to without such a document. So I believe in this, and I support it. But I'm just one of us. So is there a motion to approve this?
Mr. President, I'd like to say something if I can.
Okay.
It's Rose.
Yes, Rose.
I know, Brian, you've done your best and your staff has done the best, and I've read the plan, and some of the questions that are being asked here today are questions that should have been answered in the plan, and they are in the plan. I want to also point out to everybody that it may not be the best plan, but Brian was asked to do it by the state. And Governor Wolf has ordered the schools to be open until we hear otherwise. We have to make a plan. But what I'm aware of is that we're not even addressing the concerns of our children who have to get back to school, who have to have some point of normalcy, like all of us do. It's not the best plan in the world. And sure, we can twink it. And sure, there are things that, Neil, we don't like about the busing. There are things that are not perfect in the plan, but it is just that, a plan to get our kids back for their own safety and welfare and health. Look at it from their perspective.
Well, at this point, where we can discuss it further, but first we need to have a motion to make it official what it is we are discussing.
Mr. President, I make a motion to pass the plan as presented.
Moved by Mr. Spiegel. Is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Rose. Now discussion, and we'll observe the rules of our discussion, which means each board member can have up to 2 opportunities to speak for a total of 10 minutes. Go.
Mr. President?
Mr. Spiegel.
You know, I really agree with both you and Rose here in that, you know, this is just something from the military, I suppose, that a 90% of a plan right now is much better than 100% of a plan too late. And totally what Rose said is our children need educated, you know, in all of our dealings, with all of our points of contact we have. I know that parents want their children to be educated. Not that they just want to get them out of their house. They want them to get educated. When you speak to the children, my own children, whomever that I speak with, most kids actually want to learn. Most kids actually want to go to school. There are some that don't, certainly, but they want to go to school because they know that they're missing out. Besides the parents, I mean, these parents, a whole lot of parents do truly care about their education. And I think it's up to the parents to make the decisions if they are comfortable with sending their children to school and assuming the inherent risks. Then it's not for us to dictate to parents what is in their own children's best interest. We can give them guidelines. And I think that this plan certainly gives a whole lot of flexibility with a lot of guidelines. And we'll let it up to the parents to make that decision. I do understand there's flaws in this plan. There's flaws in every plan across the nation when it comes back to education. But this is a pretty darn good plan. And if we wait too long, it's going to be detrimental. I can only imagine the 2nd and 3rd graders who are not getting the education that they need. Big difference from a senior in high school that, you know, we might be refining their education some, but those little guys, they really, really, really need to learn how to read. They really need to learn how to write the basics because you know they're not getting it at home. How many of those Chromebooks didn't even get turned on one time during the spring semesters? They didn't even get turned on. If we wait another 6 months, 8 months, whatever it happens to be, that means we're further dumbing down the people that need the education the most. I'm fully in favor of passing this plan. Thank you.
Next.
Mr. President.
Nichols. Go ahead, Sumner Nichols.
Yes. Okay. We have a plan that is flexible and it has possibility of remote and hybrid and all in class. I think it's too flexible. I think at this time we need to focus on what we are going to do. And I would prefer that we open on a remote basis at this time. It obviously would be subject to adjustment down the road, but I think that is the prudent decision to make. This has not receded the way it was thought it would recede. We are sitting with cases in Pennsylvania that would be equivalent to Florida a month ago, and now Florida is at 13 or 14,000 cases a day. None of us know very much about this virus at this point. Everybody's trying to do their best, but the safe thing is to open with distance learning. Thank you.
Next,
Mr. President,
Arlene.
again, I really applaud you, staff, administration. You have done a remarkable job. I just can't support it. The number one, because we're not supposed to put 48 students on a bus. It's not the guideline. It's not the recommendation. It's not 6 feet apart. So that's number one. And I know we can't afford not to do it that way, which is why I think we can't really afford to let all of our students that want to come back, unfortunately, right now. And it makes me mad. Makes me very angry that we can't offer that to our families. But that's what's safe right now in this pandemic. So if we can work on that, that would be huge for me. Number one, I'm still with Lori, very uncertain about the number of students that might show up and how we move students around the building. I know, for example, I can just pick out one of my classrooms that I had at Jefferson, room 215. There's no way you can put 20 desks in there 6 feet apart. I mean, Neil, you can pull up and tell me you can, but I just don't see it. And again, that's not your fault. None of this is any of your fault. You've done a remarkable job and you wanted to offer the very best option you could. But I think we have to go back to the drawing table and say, what is really realistic that we in the Erie School District can offer? And I do think that ventilation study is going to be huge, because then we really will know what areas of our buildings will be able to be utilized and what areas won't. What happens if we have too many students that sign up for, say, Lincoln, and we don't have the capacity there? Where are those students going to go? Like, that's not in the plan. Are we going to utilize other buildings? Those are the kind of questions I have, and I apologize for not giving you all of the myriad of questions that I have, but I knew the one point for me right now was the transportation and the nursing services. Also, we also got to think about our mortality rate. You know, I don't know if this is accurate, but I had a health professional tell me the other day what the mortality rate would be for our students. And with the number of students we have in the district, then it would be likely that we would lose 19 students at some point in time. I can't look at that and say that that's safe.
To my fellow board members with concerns, I just have a question for you. What would be the harm to pass this resolution today and continue to address the concerns that were expressed here today and any more that arise in the next 5 weeks? I mean, it seems to me this just establishes a framework for us to move forward in a direction and be ready for anything as best we can. Whereas if we reject this today, are we going to then just zero in on only transportation, only ventilation, and tell the parents to wait? We're not sure what we're going to do. I mean, I'm asking, respectfully asking, because everyone certainly has the right to be guided by their conscience and their judgment.
Sean, I think we have to look at the models that we were given by the state and then realistically say which is the one that we can be most successful at. And I right now don't think that having everyone come back is it.
Call be made in late August, though, Darlene?
No, I don't think we should make that call in late August, but we do have to deal with the transportation issue. And when we think about how many parents we've heard from, we've only heard from 2,000. I don't know how many parents we have in the district, but if we have 11,000 students, I mean, obviously some parents have, 4 or 5 students, but how many parents have we actually really heard from as to what their decision is on whether or not they want what their comfort level is? So, we kind of need to know that information. We also really do need to know our staff, our staff numbers. We have to have a better grasp on what they really are and how many we're going to need in each model. So I don't know if you've calculated the staff that we're going to need for each model, but we also need to have that information. I kind of want to know the teacher-student ratios as well.
I took it as a given that adopting this would then set all of those questions in motion and allow parents to state their preferences and we discover what the faculty's plans are, those that are going to be able to show up and those that can't or don't want to. I just saw this as a way for a framework again for us to move forward.
Mr. President?
Mr. Nichols. Second time.
I think the board realizes we have to do something this fall, and the distance learning is what I think we should start with and approve that now. We only have about a month here to hold this decision off on whether it's going to be, what form it's going to take, or this idea of combining everything. I think it's too much work and it's too dangerous. I think that we can vote in this meeting on saying we are going to open on a distance basis. So there would be a clear indication of what we are going to do coming out of this meeting. Thank you.
Well, if this doesn't pass and you want to offer that resolution, I won't support it because I think with 5 weeks to go, we have to be ready for any eventuality and not decide at this point, not knowing what 5 weeks are going to bring us in any direction. I'm not ready to zero in on one absolute direction. That's just my humble opinion. Anyone else on the resolution?
Mr. President, I have my hand raised.
Okay.
I got disconnected, but my thing is, I know that they have a poll. I understand that, but I don't feel like that's the correct poll. I feel like it's too in general. If we're gonna, I don't think it. I think we should have parents register. I think that that's how you should handle that, because you can't poll and say, "Do you want your kids to come back? How many kids you got?" We don't know what school they go to. We can have all parents that hyperbole say that they want their kids to come back to school in no other school. So I think when you're doing it, when you're doing this poll, it has to be way more specific than, do you want your kids to come back to school or not? No, we need to know we need to know your name. We need to know what school your kids are going to be attending. We need to know the family. And if push come to shove and the state say, hey, y'all better have some kids in this school come the first day of school, I think it should be a lottery based on the people who registered. That way, you got some people who wanted to be there. They put their name, they register their students for in-person instruction. You know what schools they're going to go to, and do a lottery for each school. And then you would know how many teachers you need and what bracket or whatever that. That's just an option. That's just a thought. But I do think that we need more specific engagement, more than just asking them, do they plan to attend or not? That's not specific enough, because we don't know. Like, say for instance, myself, if I go, we went and did the poll online. It's not asking me what school my kids go to. I got kids in all different schools, so like I think that the polling needs to be more specific. It needs to actually be a registration. I think that, and it should be on a first come first serve basis. If that's what they're going to force us to do, I absolutely think it's a bad idea to put kids back in the building until we got a solid plan, if at all. But I know as a child care provider, we had to open up regardless of COVID or not. And we did, and we opened up safely, and it's been going well. But there's a lot of guidelines and a lot of stress that's involved with it that I don't think that we as a district are prepared for. And I do feel like we need to be more specific. When I sent out information to my parents and let them know I was going to be reopening on June 1st, they had to register with me to come back, because you can't just walk in here and say, I want to come back to daycare today. No, I need registration. I need information. I need schedules, because technically, times are supposed to be staggered, in which we do at my facility. We have specific times that each family brings their students, and I know it'll be different for us as the school district, but a lot of things are the same because you're dealing with the same thing, kids and families. So I think that we need to start by finding out specific information from the people who are on the 2,000 people that got polled. We need to know who they are, what school their kids will be going to. Do they need busing? That's another thing. We need to ask them, because my students qualify to get on the bus, but I would never let them get on the bus. So if I actually did bring them back to school, that's 2 less students you would have to worry about on that bus. You see what I'm saying? So I think over the next week or two, we need to get real specific with the community and our parents and families so that we know exactly who's trying to come back to school, exactly who needs transportation, and things like that. So I think that with it being the end of July, we need to get busy because there's a lot of work to be done, way more than I think people realize. And you need to also have the safety precautions really, really tight because your teachers are going to want to see that. They're going to feel uncomfortable regardless, but without some real specific things in place, you're going to have some teachers that don't want to come back. And that's the last thing we need to do is lose any staff in regards to this. So I would agree, start off with distance learning, but if they do force our hand to provide in-person instruction, we need to be real specific in how we do it, who we let back in, and even maybe consider some type of lottery with our regular education students, and then consider how we'll handle our special education students as well, because that'll be a whole nother ball game. So it's a lot. I don't know. Hey, if you need some insight or another person, another set of eyes on it, I'll be more than happy to help. But I'm telling you, it's going to be a difficult process and not one that we can take lightly, because we don't need students or staff, being overly exposed. They're going to be exposed no matter what, but not overly exposed.
Mr. President.
Mr. Polito.
I want to point out that we've been talking about this concept. I look back in the board agenda, and it was mid-May when we started sharing this idea of trying to get all our students back and giving families options. We've updated the board through the mailings. We've provided opportunities at board meetings. We invited our board members to the leadership conference to hear our plans. We've given, I think, the board every opportunity to weigh in and express their concerns about this. And today is the first time, except for Mr. Nichols, that I'm hearing people so concerned about the plan that they're saying they're voting no. So we've moved along based on the assumption that you've been okay with that and wasted a lot of time and a lot of energy on this plan developing it. Here we are today. We pulled this whole plan together with the intention, Ms. McNair, of actually laying out specifically what our plans are going to look like to our families and asking them to make a selection by August 14th. So if the board is going to vote this down, we need some specific guidance from you on what we need to do. And I got to tell you, we're out of time. So if you do vote this down, and certainly have every right to do so, we're going to have a limited opportunity to pull another plan together and bring it back in time. So more than likely, I would agree that we would be moving to remote learning. But again, if you do, we need specific guidance and direction from the school board so that we don't go down the wrong path once again.
I think it would be irresponsible for us to reject this plan today and then walk away and say, now what? I just think that, as the superintendent just said, we have a shrinking amount of time to prepare. I thought this gave us the best shot to begin to do that and to lock people in once they see it officially and can react to it. But to reject it and have nothing in its place, I would just say to those board members who aren't happy with this, please offer a resolution or an amendment to this for us to direct the administration to go forward from today to do something else other than this. And if it's to decide you don't want to open schools at all in the fall, say so.
Hi, Mr. President, it's Lori. So I feel like, even if we want to recap for the past couple of months, that's fine. But the reality is, nobody on this board knew where we were going to be come July, right? So we've all, exhausted the appreciation of efforts, which we do appreciate that. But there's still a reality in the going forward, right? There's still a reality of looking at our students. There's still a reality of looking at our inner city kids and how they'll be affected, through our plan, right? And so, and I get that we've done everything and we're like, they can safely fit. But honestly, I can't see kids 100%. And I know you're like, well, all the kids aren't coming back, but still a large capacity of kids in a room just does not sound like it's, what are we going to do when kids elope the room? What are we going to do when kids have to go to a counselor's office that's really small? What are we going to do with all of the what ifs that are going to happen in a classroom? And what is the problem if we shift our focus to remote learning and maybe looking at how can we have maybe teachers in the classroom by themselves and they're teaching? Now the students still have to sign on, and they have to sign on in a timely frame. If they don't, they'll be marked tardy. So you still run it as a classroom, just like if they were in person, but they just won't be there, right? And then the teachers can feel safe, and the students can. If we're saying that every student is covered, because that's what we said a while ago, we're saying that every student is covered with technology, then why not pull the focus in on there? Why not hone into making sure that all of our students will have their technology? We said at the beginning, we don't even know if all of them will have the technology on time. So even, and I'm not angry, I'm not frustrated. No, frustrated, yes. And my heart is a little achy because I do get that our kids do need to be in school. They do need an education. But is this safe? Is this sound? Is this going to make our students and our teachers stronger? Or is it going to put strain and stress in the buildings, right? Because now you have to think, what if kids, I went to a pizza shop the other day and I seen a student and they thought with no hesitation to run and hug me. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Get off me, kid. You can't go hug me. What was I supposed to do? So I'm just giving that as one example, and we're not even in a school building yet, where every kid is going to want to do that. Does my heart break for situations that we don't even know is happening outside of the school buildings? Yes. But then there's a reality. If what Darlene gave, those statistics of 19 kids passing, right? I mean, I just want us to settle in on that. 19. And that we might be like, oh, we have 11,000 kids, 19 isn't a lot. That's a lot of life gone because of a plan that we felt, we should just be reactive right now. We're always talking about being proactive and not reactive. So this is our time now to hone in on that. And this is not to shut you guys down and all the work that you've done. We appreciate it. I appreciate it, but I didn't know by any means that we were going to be still in this kind of phase come July, heading into August, So, I mean, I don't think that it should be taken as if we just were neglecting anything. I just think along the way, no one knew what it would look like come July. I mean, we didn't really think we were going to be out from March 16th up until now, right? Everybody, we thought 2 weeks and we'll be back in the buildings. And then it just kept going and going. And here we are in July, still with no answers and, no resolutions and all of that stuff. So I just think there's a whole lot to be mindful of. And for me, I'm not opposed to the remote learning. I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to if teachers and admin could be in the building and they could facilitate as if a class was there, but they're not. I'm not opposed to that. And I know you're saying like we're too late, but if remote learning was already included in the plan, then now I'm just like, maybe bring more people on the teams, to help with guiding, engaging and all of that stuff. But I mean, I had a conversation yesterday, and Brian, granted, it might have been too late to have that conversation, but I we had a conversation and I still expressed to you my heart. I didn't tell you yes or no yesterday. I just expressed all the questions. And then I reiterated a lot more questions today because I feel like the community has a right to hear answers, thorough answers to a plan that could possibly put their child to their resting place early.
Mr. President?
Go ahead, Erica.
I'm sorry, I normally wouldn't speak up, but I really feel like we have to make a comment here that a couple of times now it's been mentioned about a mortality rate, and I need to make clear that that's from a source that we don't know, and that many factors can affect that. So just because this is a public meeting, and I know sometimes some comments can get reported and go beyond this meeting, I want to make that clear to please use that number or don't use it, but if so, use it in proper context, and we don't know the context of that number. I'm sorry.
And I agree, Erica. Thank you for saying that. I did say that I didn't know if that source was accurate or not, but I do know right now the mortality rate is 0.2. And I know that is not the rate that would be for children in the age group. that we're talking about. So 0.2, that'd be 246 students. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So 0.1, divide that in half. It's not going to happen. But I want us to be aware of the fact that we are putting our community at risk, I believe, when we have too many students in the building at one time or too many students on a bus at one time. And the bus issue, I know people are thinking I'm being picayune about this, but it really concerns me because, number one, I know what happens while we're waiting for the school bus. And students are supposed to wear masks, but who's going to make sure that they're wearing masks? Students are supposed to be looking straight forward, but who's going to make sure they're looking straight forward? And they're not being monitored before they get on the bus. They're being monitored when they get to school. And so then they might have already infected students on the bus on the way to school. We don't have a very good control on that right now. So that is a big concern of mine. And again, I guess I'm bringing that issue up because I want to make it clear to the community that we don't necessarily have the funding that other districts have to apply to the requirements that have been set forth for us, which is that we're supposed to have, I believe, no more than 24 students on a bus. So Neil, I don't know if you can address that for me or not, why we're going to have 48.
Is that a question?
Is it because we don't have enough buses? Is it because we don't have enough drivers? So, Ed Pelletella said in the paper today, we still don't have enough drivers.
So I'm here. I was unmuting myself. So a couple of things. We, at our full complement, we have 31 buses. So we would have 31 drivers. We believe that we can get all of our elementary kids, again, as Erica said earlier on each of those buses on a single run, because that's about 1,300, I think it's 1,388 kids. If we put 48 kids on each bus and they're all going at once, we could look at possibly doing a double run, which I know we can. That would change a couple of things as far as the start times of some of our buildings. And so those were some of the things that we were contemplating and going back and forth with and weighing the options. The two things that we were kind of holding on to is that the American Academy of Pediatrics did state that kids need to be there, and they were using a 3-foot distance with face coverings. We are also going with, I believe it was the National School Facilities Association put out something that said the same thing, that 2 students per bus with face coverings would be sufficient enough. We're going back to that idea of what exposure is defined as by the Department of Health, which is within 6 feet without a face covering for more than 10 minutes. And so the face covering does become a very integral part to everything that we're doing, which, to your point, Ms. Feeney, we need to make sure that the kids are wearing face coverings.
And we have to hire people to make sure that they're doing that.
Yes, that is all part of what we are looking at. We're looking at getting enough bus drivers so that we have the full complement of 31 drivers. We're looking at getting teachers' assistants on the buses. As you saw on the plan, even how we put kids on the bus is spelled out. Obviously, we're going to want to put siblings next to each other because they're coming from the same household. But at the same time, the first kids picked up and the last kids dropped off on every bus route, they're going to be the ones in the back seat. Because what we can do by that point is if you fill the bus from the back to the front, then you don't have kids crossing from each other. Okay, and as much as you can do this to some extent, maybe not in the middle of January because it's 12 degrees outside. If you're opening up the windows, then you do have a natural flow of ventilation in each bus because the airflow is coming when the windows are open. And so if you seat kids from the back to the front, then they're not crossing each other. And then as long as the windows are open, then you've got enough ventilation that you've got that exchange of fresh air on each bus. So that coupled with the face coverings, coupled with the idea and the fact that after every bus run, we will be using an electrostatic sprayer to spray down and disinfect the entire bus. We're going to use the hydrogen peroxide solution, which has got a 1-minute kill time. So a bus driver can legitimately disinfect an entire bus probably within 5 minutes. If they start at the back of the bus, they start spraying the solution. By the time they get to the front, they go right back to the back and they wipe it down. And so we've been trying to think about what we're trying to do is the health and safety plan lays out the guidelines, and then we're going to funnel all of these individual decisions and all these concerns that everybody raised through the health and safety plan. So the pickups and drop-offs, as I said earlier. So parent pickups, clearly we're going to have to look at whether or not parents can come into the building. But maybe the bus drop-offs is one door, and the student drop-offs from parents is another door, and the walking students are going to be another door. Every building is going to be different. So we're going to have to give everybody a guideline, and then funnel the individual procedures at each building through that guideline.
I also want to point out, and I just checked the guidance again, the PDE guidance on transportation does not require 6 feet of distance. In fact, we took their guidance verbatim and cut and pasted it into our plan. And I also want to point out that we did have the Department of Health review that. Their initial recommendation was to change the 6 feet in the classroom, which we did. And that's why our yellow and green are exactly the same. The only difference we had before between yellow and green, because we were being cautious, was less than 6 feet in the classroom. Based on the PDE guidance and the recommendation from the Department of Health, we, to err on the side of caution, just cut the yellow and pasted it into the green, so they're exactly the same, and both very conservative as far as what we're doing.
Mr. President.
So, go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
Yes, this is my second time to speak. One, this is a very emotional issue for a lot of people. In fact, for all of us. That's why we're involved in the school district, to begin with. So I appreciate everybody's point of view. But I will say, our staff knows better than we do. I'm a subject matter expert on baking. I can tell you everything you want to know about baking bread. But do I know all of the logistics about running a school, all the operations, all the nuances within running a 11,000 student school? No. That's where we have to trust our staff. I think they have a very detailed plan that is flexible. One, the other point is, well, I have a couple points that I'm not a big one to trust government, but even if we were to trust the government's recommendation and we are following through with the state's recommendation, we're complying with what they are telling us is the best way to operate, we should follow through with their guidance. I personally think that it's a lot of overkill, overly engineered, but that's fine. I'll say that, just in our day-to-day living here, my son plays baseball. There's a bunch of kids hanging out in the dugout. They're fine. I go to Walmart practically every day, it seems like. And if we can send our families to Walmart, why can't we send our families to school? That I could go on about all of this. One, I do think that another point is I think that a lot of parents do take this serious. I think almost all of them do. To some extent, they will be changing their behaviors. For instance, I suspect, and I have no empirical data, I have no polling, but I suspect that just like Angela said, she doesn't want to have her children bused, so she will probably take them herself. I know that my son will be eligible for busing. He won't take a bus. I'll take him. So I think that's a big variable there that we just don't know. And since we don't know that, we can't presume to know what the answer is. Secondly, in my opinion, and I think it's a common opinion, the remote learning is a failure for those that don't want to do it. Brian, what did you say? Something like 40% of our students did not even turn on their Chromebooks once? I know I can sit in my office, as I'm sitting here right now during the spring semester. It would be midday. It would be 10, 11, 12 o'clock, and I see nothing but a whole bunch of kids walking by my front door in my office every day, all day long. And I am not convinced, and nobody here is going to convince me that if we go to a remote school program process, that the same kids I see every day out my window here are all of a sudden going to have parents are going to sit down, open up your Chromebook, and go to school. It's just not going to happen. is largely impractical. And as we talked about in the past, our students in Erie are the ones that need educated a heck of a lot more than a lot of other students among the Commonwealth. Secondly, we can have all the technology in the world. We can give every single kid the best laptop in the world. Mom and dad still not going to make them turn it on. And the reality is, unfortunately, there's a whole lot of parents that do not have the resources or the wherewithal to help their children with their education. They just don't know it. My own son, I'm pretty good at math. He brings home some of these math problems that I have to call my daughter. Hey, how do you do this? I just don't know how to do that stuff anymore. And I stay up on education. You talk about the stress, Lori, you're right. There's a whole lot of stress. There's some stress with the students, some with the parents, some with the staff, some of the teachers or whomever. But it's all of our prerogatives. If the teachers opt not to come in, well, then that's something for our staff to have to plan with. If the parents opt not to go to school, that's something that our staff has to plan with. Even in some cases, if the students themselves opt not to go to school, that's something we can plan with. But we have to look in their best interest. And another thing is, I do believe that if we don't offer an in-person classroom, we will lose some of our students to other schools that have in-person classroom. I just know I've taught remote classes at the collegiate level. I've taken remote classes. They're just not the same. I'm not saying in every instance it's not the same, but for the most part, it's just not the same. And our kids need educated. And we cannot fall into this hype of the media and misinformation. You start talking about the mortality rates. It's horrible when people throw around statistics that are not vetted. It gets people scared. We can't do that. It's horribly irresponsible for us. We need to set the example and have the best foot forward and the best ideas to help our children succeed. And by letting them not get educated, because they will not be educated if we don't have in-person and have the options that we have. I will not be convinced otherwise that 10 years from now, people aren't going to look back and say, boy, see that big dip in the learning curve? That was because people didn't go to school in class. It's an emotional issue for all of us. I think we would be absolutely remiss in our responsibilities as education leaders if we don't let our staff go forward with a plan. We need to tweak the plan as necessary, but at least we have a plan to go forward. Thank you.
Okay, Tom. Anyone else?
This is Tyler. I think I'll be brief. We're gonna have a dip in education regardless if it's in person, if it's remote this year, because the pandemic, the civil unrest, the amount of trauma that our children have endured and will continue to endure. There's gonna be disruption. There is. I guess as a board member, I would most comfortably vote for the hybrid model or the remote model. That those would be the two that I would be most comfortable moving forward. I don't think that we can safely implement the traditional model. But I think that there's been a lot of steps that have shown that we could do the hybrid model with a heavy lean on those doing the live streaming or the remote when possible and feasible, at least opening into the school year until we're able.
Tyler, you don't think we could make that decision in late August?
I think we need to make a decision and so that staff can move forward and families can prepare. I'd rather us do it sooner rather than later. I don't know what is going to change in the pandemic other than more people contract it, and we're seeing our numbers go back up to show. So I just don't want to. I don't want us to keep. We've used this before. I don't want us to keep pushing off something that we know is. It's not going to change for the better. It's only going to change for the worse. Our numbers continue to climb, and it's showing that we as a community haven't done what we needed to do to remain in the green phase. And I don't see how that's going to change as the weather has stayed nice, other than in us using the hybrid or the remote options.
Well, again, I don't see how approving this plan nullifies, negates, or ignores any of the concerns that were expressed here today. I think it gives a framework for all of that to be dealt with. If we don't approve this, and you want to approve something specific and the votes are there, then we do. But otherwise, we're walking out of here today and saying to the public, we don't know what we're doing yet.
President?
Rose?
Yeah, can I just say my last bit here? This plan is not a perfect plan. Brian, you and your staff have done a great job. You address every need possible. Does it need tweaking? Yes. If we're going to open, yes, everything needs tweaking. However, there's a component here that we're missing, and that's the school choice. Parents have a right to a choice. If they want their children to come back for whatever reasons, if they want to do the hybrid, that's up to them. Or if they want to do remote, they do it every day. So I would strongly encourage the board to let our parents decide which model they want and then take the plan further and develop it further. And I would also encourage every board member that's sitting here today to ask Brian or sit with Neil and go over their questions. Because Brian, if I'm not mistaken, I texted you or I called you and we had a conversation on who's going to take temperatures, who's going to do the busing, whatever, the nurses. I asked every question, and I'm telling you, I'm walking away feeling very confident that Brian and the staff, Neil, who's in charge of the plan, has things under control. However, I do feel strongly, let the parents, why are you taking the control away from the parents? Let the parents decide. Just as Tyler, people don't follow the commands out there that were given to them about wearing masks and things of that sort. That's their choice. Let the parents decide. As a parent, I would want that option. Thank you.
Okay, I'm remembering that we mentioned athletics earlier in the meeting was included in this, and it seems to me if we reject the plan, we're pretty much going to say athletics is over with too. Or am I wrong about that? Well, athletics isn't as much of a concern as the instructional part, but again, I just see this as a framework to allow all of these concerns to be addressed and recognized and filtered through, and for parents to react to and make their choices, so we begin to see where the interests and the preferences are and react to them and discover modifications that we'll want to make and need to make. But without some kind of a framework, I'm just very distressed.
Hey, Mr. President?
Tom, you've spoken twice though, Tom.
You're right. So since I proposed this, would we be able to table this and perhaps have another meeting a week from now and follow up with what Rose is saying, and the individual board members can speak with Brian or Neil or whomever else they need to, and perhaps since now the staff knows there's more concern, can we address it and just
always an option, Tom. I'll ask the superintendent what he thinks about standing with us today, or that, or whatever his. I want to have enough respect for his work on this to ask him what he'd prefer we do. I only sense there's three of us supporting this, so saying that I could be wrong, but I'd ask the superintendent how he would feel about a table.
I mean, if there's any way to salvage the work we've done and adjust it so that the board members are comfortable, that's certainly the preferred method. We were all set to release this to the parents tomorrow. So I, rather do this sooner rather than later. If I would maybe recommend that each board member send me their questions, if this would be the proposed method, and then we can have another study session meeting for us to answer every single one of those questions before there's a vote. And if there's things out of those questions that we decide we need to adjust in the plan, we can do that before we bring it back to you for a vote.
Brian, I don't want to throw the whole plan out. I just want to address the things that weren't in the plan that I think need to be addressed. I agree with Tyler. I look more at maybe a hybrid model, or my numbers are what concern me. I know you're telling me that we can do it, but I was a teacher for a long time, and I'm telling you, I don't know. I think we're setting our staff up for failure, and I think we might be setting our families up for failure, and that's the only reason I'm saying no to this today. So there's a great deal of work in here. I don't want to throw it all out.
Mr. President, I want to say that I
I agree with Tom as far as or not even voting on this, and Brian, what he just said, not even voting on this right now. And like I said before, I am running an educational facility, so I know it needs to be much more than this put in place, period. So I do have some insight, because not only do I run an educational facility myself, I have students who will be returning to school in the fall. So I do agree that we need to have some conversations, whether it be sending, like Brian said, he would prefer we email him, which would be the best way to do it, because we could even have a email trail so that we can see each other's questions, so we don't overwhelm him with the same concerns.
Well, Ms. McGarrett, I'm sorry to interrupt, but again, we don't want to carry out the conversation on email. My suggestion.
Well, yeah, but whatever it is email him your questions. If we want, whatever the case may be, is you get some information from us, and then you can update and maybe send updates, as to what is included now into the plan or not. But regardless of whatever, I don't feel like it, even though I will agree with you, we did drop the ball. I'm not going to sit here and not take responsibility for not reaching out to you. And I'm not above even saying that I was wrong, not being more involved in paying attention to you trying to get this information to us earlier. And anybody who didn't reach out to you is wrong. And I apologize for myself and for anybody else. But what I'm saying is, now that we have been woken up about the issue and have something to say, as board members, we have a responsibility to the people who voted for us to make sure that we do the right thing by our students and families. And I do feel like we should wait and let you adjust it and then vote on it.
I have a question, Brian. Are we able to make all the questions that we send? Is there any way that you can make that public, so that since we're talking about parents having a choice?
That's really what I was recommending, Ms. Pickett.
Okay.
Send me the questions, and then we'll have a public meeting to answer all of them.
Well, I'm not talking about for me. Okay, so you mean public, like I would like for it to be posted.
Send me the questions, and then we'll schedule a study session or a committee, the whole meeting, to answer those questions and have a public discussion about what we need to do to adjust the plan.
Mr. Speaker, did you make a motion?
Say that again, sir.
Did you make a motion to table this?
Yes, I make a motion to table this vote, please.
I'll second it.
For how long? A week?
Brian, how long do you think? Can we get it done in a week? 10 days at max? We need to go forward,
I'd prefer to do it by the end of the week if we can. If you post the questions by tomorrow, we could set something up by Friday.
I'm in.
I second that motion.
The table should have
until Monday, or until Friday.
Pardon?
So can we have another meeting like this to vote on Friday, or will we have the information come back to us, sit on the information, and then come back and vote? How will that play out?
I would recommend let's have a committee of the whole on Friday to answer questions and come to a consensus on what needs to be changed, and then have another voting meeting the following Monday. Does that make sense to everyone?
This Friday and next Monday?
Yes.
All right, Tom, is that your motion to table this resolution and to deal with it next Monday? And in the in-between time on Friday, we have a public committee of the whole meeting?
Mr. President, before we choose Monday, I have a land bank board meeting at Monday that was rescheduled because we have a quorum.
This is more important, Darlene, than all of our individual things. I mean, if we're not ready to do this today, we're going to run into days.
I'm just asking if we could accommodate time-wise. I'm not available at 1. I'm available the rest of the day. I'm just not available from 1 to 2. And the only reason I'm asking is because we have very important business that we did not get to do. And it's maybe not as important as this, but it is important.
So John, I'm requesting to table this, reconvene with a committee of the whole meeting on Friday, with the intent, with a time to be determined, vote on Monday. That would be Monday the 27th.
27th.
All right, Monday's close enough, and then over the next few days, we can have Angela Jones help us zero in on what time we're all available. So does everyone understand the motion that was made by Mr. Spagel that we're going to table this until next Monday at a time to be determined, and that in between on Friday, data will be gathered, and we'll have a committee of the whole meeting on Friday, again at a time to be determined? Okay, I think I heard Rose second that.
That was me.
Okay, Darlene. Darlene Feeney seconded that. Roll call on tabling it as read, as explained.
Mrs. McNair,
Yes.
Mr. Nichols,
No.
Ms. Pickens,
Yes.
Ms. Sheridan,
Yes.
Mr. Spagel,
Yes.
Mr. Titus,
Yes.
Ms. Cooley,
Yes.
Mrs. Feeney,
Yes.
Mr. Harkins.
No. Okay, we're tabled until next Monday with a meeting on Friday. Is there any other matter for discussion on the active part of the public part of the agenda?
I have a question, Mr. President.
Go ahead, Gwen.
Our concerns, would they flow over into the Eagle's Nest and their opening?
He approved a resolution earlier in this meeting to approve an agreement with them.
That's a good. I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Go ahead.
That's a good point, Ms. Cooley. We're going to have to ask the Eagle's Nest to hold off on their plans until we have our health and safety plan approved. So we'll address that with them.
Thank you.
Darlene, did you want to hear anything about the student handbook or the dress code that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I had a parent reach out to me concerned that in the student handbook, we have a requirement at Collegiate Academy for AP classes. And I'm wondering if we can relook at that in this incidents where we're in COVID, that maybe we want to have some discussion about whether or not we should keep that requirement. I was told by this parent that it is a matter of duress for the students. And then also when I was looking at the handbook, I know we have all different types of, the grade point averages for being accepted into collegiate. And we do realize that how we're educating our students right now is not optimal, and that it could have an effect on their GPAs. And so I guess before we approve that handbook, I guess I want to look at some of those things in relationship to COVID-19.
Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn this meeting, and then we have an executive session scheduled, as you know. So if there's nothing else for this meeting, can we have a motion to adjourn it?
I move we adjourn, Mr. President.
Seconded by a couple of people. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? This meeting's adjourned, and we will pause for 5 minutes, and then have an executive session on several matters.